The Zoom lady's dulcet tones, I just love to hear when recording with friends, and especially a friend who is obviously dressed to impress as much as Peter here. Peter hasn't been on the channel before, but Peter Jones will be a familiar face to many watching. Peter, thank
Pleasure,
you
sir.
very much for joining us. And I say us, it's just me. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Again, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
This is absolutely well, almost possibly going to be fun. Certainly from your point, it'll be fun. Your stuff will be great. I'm not sure I'll be terribly impressed by myself, but that won't stop me, don't worry. So by way of introduction, folks, we're going to be doing, Peter and I, we're going to be doing a Bond series where once a month, we're going to be having a look at two Bond films, and we're going to run through the pantheon, and then we'll, if there's any miscellany we want to pick up in the end, if we want to do the spoof version of Casino Royale, maybe, or Never Say Never Again, that kind of thing. I'm sure we can circle back around, although Never Say Never Again, at least we can just copy half of our Thunderball episode.
Right.
But we thought it would be fun to start with. Being this here, being a half music channel, wouldn't it be fun to start with the Bond themes? As we know, they are quite a seminal part. It's always one of the first things you hear about a Bond film is who's doing the theme, and it's always a big deal when it's first played. So Peter, I won't reveal your age, Peter, but you're very nearly 40 odds, I think, aren't you? You're somewhere in that region. So we'll stick with that number. So you're old school enough to know that how seminal the Bond themes have always been to the Bond franchise.
Yep. Yeah. This last birthday, I turned 60.
Oh,
with Bond. Easy. So that's okay.
Yeah.
So we were born together.
Yeah.
And so the history has always been there. My father introduced me to Bond films very, very early on. And as soon as I could go and see them on a regular basis upon each release, it's been a joy to look forward to them every time they come out. And it's a huge part of both my musical as a musician and my cinematic as a lover of movies. Few franchises are able to say that, that it's both cinematic and in a musical sense, so relevant and so important. So yeah, it's in my blood.
Yeah. Fantastic, because Bond, such an important part of the film is indeed the music, be it what we're doing today via the themes or via the scores by the likes of John Barry and David Arnold and Thomas Newman. But likewise, the scores and the themes themselves are cinematic, so it's a very symbiotic relationship.
Right, absolutely.
So we've got a list of, it's 20, 25 or 26, depending on...
right.
Yeah, I said if Peter wanted to go doublers on one of the films, he's more than welcome to do it. So so this is the current copy of the Best of Bond, James Bond. They just re-release a similar thing every time, but this one does indeed come out right up to Billie Eilish's No Time to Die. So although I think that will be us just a bit out of room now, so we'll probably need a third disc.
Right.
So, we'll go through our lists, a few sentences on each, and if you want to do any singing, Peter, feel free.
Well, who knows yet?
But yeah, if you want to start well, I don't know how you took it, if it was 25 or 26, but start.
I do have 25 for today.
Brilliant. And we start at the bottom. Things can only get better. So take me through your list, my man.
Yep, nobody does it better. That's correct. All right. Well, again, this is going to be exciting, and I really look forward to hearing your thoughts, and because music is so personal and so subjective, and it attaches to us differently and means different things, which is the joy of it. So just right off the bat, my number one has never changed. And my last one hasn't been topped. So it stays at the bottom. So, all right, we're going to go to 2002 and the movie Die Another Day and the title song Die Another Day, performed by Madonna. I just don't think it fits in any context, doesn't fit musically, doesn't really fit lyrically, stylistically. I don't see any throwbacks or any nuggets or any musical motifs that carry it into the series. It was just so out of character that I just can't put it anywhere other than last. So, and that will, like I said, will always stay there until heaven forbid something actually tops it. So exactly. Okay. Number 24, I'm going to go to 2008 and the movie Quantum of Solace, Jack White and Alicia Keys. And this one didn't resonate with me either. We'll talk way more about it when we actually get to the movie, because there's a lot of side notes to talk about on this one. Mm-hmm. There are definitely alternative options and rejected themes that I found far superior. And those will be, like I said, addressed when we get there. It just, again, trying maybe to be too relevant, too hip. So it doesn't have a legacy feel to it, just like Die Another Day doesn't. So that's got to stay down there at 24. My 23rd pick is back to 1983 and the movie Octopussy, in the song All Time High, sung by Rita Coolidge, who I have a lot of respect for. I think she's a solid performer. I like her material. But a lot of times an artist is only as good as what they're given. And in this case, it's just not a song that kind of stuck with me. It seems kind of silly. There's not a lot of reference to the what goes on in the film or anything like that. And again, there's no connection to it. If it was heard separately, never part of the canon, you really wouldn't have any idea it's related to Bond. And for me, that puts it down at the lower part of the list. We get to number 22, and similar to Quantum of Solace, I went back to 1974 and The Man with the Golden Gun, performed by Lulu. This one was higher when I was younger. It's dropped down the list as others have come. I have mixed feelings about it, and I was kind of torn putting it down here, and maybe a list I would do a month or a year from now, it might be different. I do like the lyrics. I think they're fun. It does reference the film, and I like that. And she still does a wonderful job of it. She performed it earlier this year at Royal Albert Hall, and it sounds wonderful. She still sounds great and enthusiastic. And so she's still true to the song. I guess in this case, there's probably just stuff I like better. So it kind of just moved it down the list summarily because it had to go down the list. 1995, Goldeneye, Tina Turner. I'm a huge, huge fan of Tina Turner. I think she's just a powerhouse. Again, this whole film, and when we get there, raises a lot of eyebrows on how the theme music was used, how the incidental music was used in the movie, at least from my opinion. And while she does a really strong performance, and I do like the tie-ins with the horn punches during the chorus, Goldeneye, bada. I liked, how they brought that in. That's very Bond-esque. You feel it. It does sound like a Bond theme. But again, there's just others I like better and had to kind of move it down. We go to number 20 and 1989's License to Kill, Gladys Knight. Again, this is an artist that, I grew up with. Gladys Knight and the Pips are classic. This is, tremendous performer and great, great artist. It's a strong cinematic song. It's got gravitas. It's orchestrated well. I love the modulation at the end. It's big, it's bombastic, but it just wasn't never really one of my favorites. Not too much to say more about that at this stage. We get to number 19, and we go to 1985's A View to a Kill from Duran Duran. I love Duran Duran. I think they're one of the most underappreciated bands of the 80s. Tremendous musicians. All the side projects that they've done are just spectacular. This one, however, sounds like it's 1985. And at the time, I think this was either the first number one or it was, I think, the first number one Bond song. I don't know if Live and Let Die went to number one. I have to check that. But Duran Duran's very proud of the fact that shot to number one. And there's a fun story behind how they got picked to do it. And we'll get into that when the movie comes along. But that one sounds a little dated to me. Instrumentation wise, it sounds like Duran Duran, which is both good and maybe in this case, not so good, because there are other things that tie into the cinematic world a little bit better sonically. We get to number 18, 2006, Casino Royale, You Know My Name, Chris Cornell. I miss Chris. Just one of the great, great rock singers of all time. So powerful, so emotional. I think the melody and the theme on it is strong. It's very cinematic. It sounds like Bond. And of course, when you put it with the title sequence, it really explodes. I think it is one of the ones that is maybe less effective as a standalone piece of music, but when it's incorporated with the visual, very powerful. And I think that's a strong tip of the hat to the Bond music of old. And I think they did a great job with that. 17, 1981, For Your Eyes Only, Miss Sheena Easton. There's going to be a kind of a theme here because of my age. A lot of these songs in the 80s became almost more popular songs than they did the movies. Not that the movies weren't successful, because they always have been to a degree. But it seemed like we have a stretch of films where it's, let's see if we can get a real strong pop hit. And, that'll even increase our publicity and all the things that go along with it. It's a strong song. It's everybody ties it into Bond. I mean, it's one of the legacy songs. She does a beautiful job on it, and it's a strong composition. But it's kind of more in the middle of my pack. So we get to 16, 1979's Moonraker. And I am an unapologetic, huge fan of Dame Shirley. You and I share a common Scottish connection, but my last name is Jones, and I've got a lot of Welsh blood pouring in me as well. And she and her male counterpart, which I'll get to later, have a very deep part in me, and she's just untouchable. She's so strong as a singer, such a great performer, just such a powerhouse. But sometimes I will take what an artist says about their material and believe them. Shirley doesn't like this song. She just doesn't like it. And in fact, from her own lips, she's never performed this live because she doesn't like it. And so who am I to disagree with her? It's still Shirley. the themes are great, the melodies are great. But there are some of hers that I like better, but it's Shirley, so she's got to be more in the middle of the pack by default. 15, Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. Nobody does it better. Miss Carly Simon. I've got two older sisters that are 3 and 6 years older than I am. And I am so grateful because I was exposed to an entire decade of music before I would have normally been exposed to it, because they are both also huge, huge music fans. And Carly was one of those first artists that I discovered reading my sister's record collections. And she's just pure class, one of the great singer-songwriters of her era. And it is a bit show-tuney for me. But her performance is so good, and it is so iconic that, here it is, it sits, pretty much right in the middle of the pack. It was probably higher back in the day. And I also have to admit that there might be a little amount of burnout on some of the more pop oriented ones that were kind of just beaten into my head over the decades. But this one stands up a little better than some of the other ones. Number 14, 1969. We have all the time in the world.
Cookie Monster's version, eh?
Yes, cookie, want a cookie. Mr. Armstrong. And I think this is a gem. And this was, I believe, the last, one of the last, if not the last recording that he did.
Yeah.
And as a musician, it cannot be understated how important and relevant Louis Armstrong is to the development and the progression of American jazz. It just, he's it. You start at A and you go to Armstrong, and there's a reason, because he's it. And I think this is a wonderful sentiment. Of course, the lyrics are extremely poignant, because for obvious reasons. It's the last thing that Bond says at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. She's got all the time in the world. And of course, she didn't. And none of us do. It's gentle. I find his performance comforting. And it's not the bombastic, big, huge, here's the movie. It's thoughtful. And I find that very appealing. And it is a real nice contrast to a lot of the other material that's in the library, because it just goes a totally different direction. So I think that one is just wonderful. Number 13, 1997's Living Daylights, Aha. Typically, I would not have cared for this song. And it's not in my wheelhouse. And it was probably in the lower third or lower quarter if I'd have done this 20 years ago. But it's grown on me. There's something about it that feels Bond-ish that it didn't before. And I really don't know specifically what it is, if it's the melody line or the chord structure that it uses. It just resonates now. And I find it to be a very appealing Bond theme. And I don't cringe when it comes on. And in fact, I'm like listening intently when I watch the movie again. So that one kind of surprised me, because that one probably wouldn't have been higher on my list if we'd have done this at a different time. Number 12, No Time to Die, 2021, Billie Eilish. This song has made a massive impression on me. I watched a very strong documentary a month or so ago, which kind of prompted this whole discussion of the music of Bond 60. And they are, Hans Zimmer is in the studio with Billie Eilish as she is working on the theme of this. And the recording studio that they used is so reverberant and so alive that she can whisper like a baby bird, and it explodes with effervescence and intensity. And I think this is one of the best tie-ins based on what the sentiment of the film presents. It's vulnerable, it's heartbreaking, it's just perfect. And I find it's haunting. And what's really scary is that they show her doing a take of it, Dave, where she does it a cappella. They turn the music off and she just sings it by herself in that room. And she's this close to the mic whispering, and it's just filling everything with energy and spirit. So this was a surprise to me, and it's right there at 12. So it's sitting just a little bit above the middle halfway point. I think this is a spectacular performance. We get to a number 11, 1973, Live and Let Die. Sir Paul kind of speaks for itself. You know, the song is a legacy song. Again, I've probably heard it more times than I really need to. You know, there's a fun story that when Sir George brought this to the Broccoli and Cubby and Salzburg. Harry Salzburg, right?
Salzburg,
yeah, good grief. They're like, yeah, it's great. Well, we've got this guy we want to sing. And he's like, you have Paul McCartney. He's like, well, we were thinking about this guy. And he goes, you have Paul McCartney. If Paul doesn't sing it, you don't get his song. You catching where I'm going? Yeah. So good thing they were smart enough and wise enough to do it. It's an iconic Bond song. I think anybody who makes a list is going to have that high on their list just for recognition and recognizability. It's a great song. But in all fairness, it's not very Bond-like. The middle section where they break it down is probably the most Bond-like energy-wise, but it doesn't resemble it in any kind of composition or in chord structures or motifs or anything like that. There really aren't any Bond-isms in it. But maybe that's what makes it unique. But it's Sir Paul, and you gotta be respectful to that. Number 10, 2015 Spectre, Writings on the Wall. Again, like No Time to Die, this one really snuck up on me. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I do. Again, there's a certain amount of vulnerability to it. An almost prognostication of disappointment, of heartache, of despair. So it's very melancholy. And like Billy's, you know, Sam has this very ethereal kind of tone to his voice. And I just think it's when the orchestration whips through and builds it up and then it breaks right back down. It's soft and quiet, and it's big and orchestrated and back and forth. It's got a lot of emotion in it. And I think this is a really spectacular song. Number 9, 2012 Skyfall. I'm not a particular fan of Adele. I don't dislike her. But I think, again, there's something in the chorus, the way it's written, that builds this momentum on top of itself that, you know, it's like, it's almost an intro, a first, you know, chapter 1, you know, act 2, and it just builds, and the choruses get bigger and stronger, and you kind of feel the energy as it gets bigger and bigger. And that's a great sign of a great Bond song. And lyrically, I think it's real strong. It's perfect in the film. It just matches right along with the visual part of it. And I think that's awesome. Number 8, Tomorrow Never Dies, 1997. Sheryl Crow is an interesting one to me. I think this one survives up here purely because I think the composition is a masterpiece. I think melodically, lyrically, it's amazing. And I think if we had 10 other artists sing it, I'd probably feel the same way. I also get the sense listening back to it that she's just about at the apex of her range. And that
she's stretching, yeah.
She's really stretching. And if, it was to go a couple seconds longer on a note here or there, we might hear a rooster.
I can imagine a few outtakes where we get to hear until that day.
Yeah. And then she sounds like Alfalfa from, Little Rascals. But I think the lyrics are just amazing. I think it's one of the best lines of any Bond film. You're not the only spy out there.
Yeah.
What a line.
Yeah.
That says, hey, it's not like you're the only one doing this. There are people after you. Do you get that? And the heartbreak of we try to get close. We want to get close. Should we get close? It's murder on our love affair. So from that standpoint,
girls, guns.
Yes, it's. I just think it's just so well done, and Cheryl does a good job with it. She's not a great singer, not in line with some of the other ones that are in here, but again, if you talked about what you're given, she was given everything, and the composition is amazing, lyrics are amazing. Orchestration is perfect, and it's one of my favorites. Number 7, From Russia with Love. I'm going to use the Matt Monro version. Again, this is a gentle song. More as you're viewing something from the outside. It's countryside view from a panoramic or something. Not something that's
you just set my city off there with something you said. I'm not sure how, but
oh really? Yeah. That's funny. It's not a prognostication of doom or evil. It's not dark, and I just think it's again it's really well orchestrated. I love the string sections on here, and that is something with a lot of these ones that are coming up that I really enjoy as standalone pieces of music. To me, this is just and at the very end when the horn comes in, dun, 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 it's just to me it's like downtown. I mean, it's just that simple. Not so serious, not too overbearing. And I've always liked that one from Matt Monro. Number 6, 1999, World Is Not Enough. I think this is a powerhouse. I think Garbage just crushes this, and Shirley is Shirley Manson, correct? She's the lead singer. Just strong, so strong and powerful, and it's big and it's cinematic and it's bombastic. And I think she just does, you can hear in this case, unlike the one I just mentioned and maybe the Louis Armstrong one, you hear in the chorus, the powers that be are working against you. This is not a happy ending. This is not going to turn out the way that we want it to turn out. It's kind of doomed, and it's huge, and it's big, and I just think she did a just remarkable job on it. And I love to give that one some volume in the stereo and just let it fly because it's really well done. My top 5, excuse me, 1967, Nancy Sinatra, You Only Live Twice. She was so nervous when she did this, she could hardly stand up. Considering those who had done it before her, I would understand. But this is just pure epic Bond music. the strings in the beginning and how they wisp. And she's got a very soft and very gentle voice that, hey, look, you only live twice, and one for your one for your dreams. I can't remember because I'm old. But when they goes, I think the biggest part is when it goes to when love is a stranger who beckons us on. That to me is just sweeping, and it's big, and you can see, I can imagine the orchestra watching the screen while they're recording it, and it just really fits perfectly. And I think it's a very well written and very well performed song. Always been one of my favorites. Number 4, 1964, Goldfinger. We're back to Dame Shirley. It would seem weird for many to have this at 4. I think to most, if they were to say, oh, do you remember a Bond song, Live and Let Die, something like that, or depending on your age. But few songs stir your memory is wah, 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 wah. It's like, okay, it's Goldfinger, it's Bond, and here comes Shirley's monstrous voice. And of course, she just crushes it. Perfect lyrics, perfect sentiment. It's unbelievably well orchestrated. It's perfect for the film. It hints and talks about almost everything in it, sentimentally wise and storytelling wise. It's just a masterpiece. I mean, any of these top 5 could be interchangeable except the top one. Number 3, back to Shirley, 71, Diamonds Are Forever. This is glorious. This is just glorious. Watching her sing this live is so emotional and so moving, and there are a few songs where, she hits notes, they lost her on. Diamonds are forever. And then, of course, the notes she hits at the end, like all of her
beat as well when it comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, anything that she does is big and huge and powerful. And the ending is just unbelievably strong.
Yeah.
And you're like, and it just all of a sudden, especially with Maurice Bender's title sequence, holy good, cut right to where it needs to go. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm in it now. Yeah. I'm in it. And you're like, this is
straight to the little gun barrel, and that's you in a Bond.
Yeah. Goes down. It's awesome. Awesome. Takes me to number 2, 1965, Thunderball. And here is her counterpart, Sir Tom. Anybody who knows me knows that Tom is my favorite performer of all time. And I used to get into arguments with my parents in 1969 and 1970 to be able to stay up and watch This Is Tom Jones on television here in the US. I was 8. And I'm like, 9 o'clock was forever late for someone who was 8 years old. But I watched him and I was just blown away. And I got my first 2 Tom Jones records, 70 and 71 respectfully, and it was game on ever since. This to me is the ultimate full formed James Bond theme song. This is everything. Huge strings, huge orchestration. Tom's voice is relentless. So much power, so much energy, and I could hear this song forever. So it's going to sit there at number 2, and I just think it's a masterpiece. Which of course brings us to Dr. No, and for me it has to start here, because without the we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And thank you, Vic Flick. And it's so amazing that this one little composition, excuse me, was able to just turn the cinematic world on its ear, metaphorically and realistically. it's perfect. There's not anybody who's ever known anything about any type of Western culture. If you play that, they're like, it's Bond. You play it, James Bond. And again, when you go back to what up, it's just, it's perfect. It's the opening riff is more in detail than, let's say, like the opening of Jaws. No less effective. But to me, Jaws was a snippet or a riff or a motif. This is a fully formed composition that tells you Bond is here. Get ready for action. And it's just perfect. And I had to have that be number one. So that is my list.
Fantastic, Peter. That is quite something, with some great context. And overall, one thing I will say is that our lists are going to be quite different in terms of ranking, but very early on in that list, you were already saying, I like this song, it's just that I like others more. And
right.
that will very much be the case with mine as well, where it's not that tracks 15, 16 are bad. It's just there's 15 or 16 better.
They're in really good company.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, by default, somebody's got to be put below some of those.
Yeah. If you know, to quote another Carly Simon song, if you're willing to play the game, you have to do that. So there's only a couple really here that I think are clunkers. And it's interesting, and we'll go into it when we talk about the ancillary things, but it's interesting that Say Never Again, the one Bond film that's an unofficial Bond, has a complete stinker of a theme tune with it. Never. Right. That shows just how hard it is actually to make a great Bond theme. The hit rate is massively impressive considering the amount of films and eras and whatnot that it's gone through. So I'll jump into my list, and I will pinpoint where I think the kind of cutoff is where I go. Actually, this is where I start to just think they're either really good or great.
Right.
My bottom, Die Another Day. It was always going to be Die Another Day. Just like the film, I remember being baffled by it at the time, thinking this is clearly, and this has happened quite a lot with Bond. They're getting in a big star because it adds some star value to the actual overall product. But it's a rare case of EON Productions not having the star work for them, but rather let the star do something themselves. I mean, some of those lyrics, with Sigmund Freud, analyze this, and it's like, what's this got to do with anything? I'm gonna, yes, no, I'm gonna,
right.
And it doesn't go with the film. It doesn't go with the title sequence, which is one of probably the darkest title sequence in the history of Bond films, with Bond being tortured, as we know, but we'll go into that when we come to the film. It doesn't say anything about the film. It doesn't add anything to the story of the film. As you mentioned, some of them like to incorporate parts of the actual story itself into the story of the song. This just feels like a Madonna song that was co-opted into this. And for me to do that for the what they marketed as the 40th anniversary movie quite heavily is a bit of an insult, actually. A very rare misfire from EON. So yeah, Die Another Day was always going to be in my bottom. I don't know what they were thinking. Coming up next, another that you had quite low, all-time high. I too think We Tequila Just Fine, but it's just such a forgettable song. From Octopussy. I would have admired the chutzpah of trying to actually just call it Octopussy and going in with the puns and whatnot. I think that would have been a much more Roger Moore way of taking it, rather than doing what we got here, which is just a very forgettable "We're in an all-time high." It's very flat as well. And actually, I don't think it shows off Rita Coolidge's actually quite diverse talents. She was or is part Native American as well. When she was with Chris Christopherson, they could have incorporated a lot of different elements here that could have been quite an interesting spin, and they didn't do. It's kind of baffling to me, and just dull because of that. 23. I'm going to go with "Living Daylight" by Aha. I do like Morton's vocals on it. I think they're pretty good, but I just think the production of the song is quite poor, and it strikes me very much as it was. And again, this isn't something rare for Bond. The last theme worked, so what can we do that's a bit similar to that? So, Duran Duran were big 2 years ago. Let's get the current version of that, and let's just have them do something quite similar. So I still like parts of it. I do like that. Oh, the living daylight. But generally speaking, I don't think, again, to go back to Rita Coolidge, I don't think it shows off Morton's range. I think he's got a fantastic. I mean, if you only know one song by the band, it'll be "Take on Me," which shows you his vocal range at least.
Right.
How did they not utilize that more here? I've no idea. So bit of a letdown. But and again, it'd be quite interesting because if I was taking these just as films, my rankings would be very different. So it'd be interesting to rediscover these in the context of the film. Next up, I'm going to go with I don't have her as highly as you do in a lot of cases. So I'm going to go with Shirley Bassey, and it's going to be "Moonraker." That I go with quite low at 22. Because I think this is, and this is where I will say that everything above here is either a good song or a world-class song, depending how high we're getting in the list. But "Moonraker" to me is the first example or the only example of Shirley's talents not being fully let off the leash. And I do like that makes it a bit of an outlier in her little catalogue of Bond films. But it's a very subdued track for Shirley to do, and it doesn't have the same epic feel, which is quite bizarre because the actual score itself is one of my favorite Bond scores overall. But the track itself doesn't soar, and I think in a film that literally soars, I mean, we head into space in that one, they should have again had Shirley be a bit more Shirley. Let Shirley be Shirley.
Right.
Shirley can't be serious.
That's right. Shirley, I can't be serious.
Next up for me, I did say that I thought Aha were just kind of copying a little bit, but I also don't rate A View to a Kill Terrible Highlight because I've got that at 21. And the reason for that is, and I'm glad you actually alluded to Duran Duran. I'm not a massive Simon Le Bon fan. I actually think he sounds quite off key sometimes, and I don't love his voice a lot of the time. And I kind of wish that Power Station had done this theme, and we could have had Robert Palmer singing the theme tune for A View to a Kill.
Right.
But I just think that this is a little bit all over the place. Musically, I can hear what they're going for in terms of trying to marry the new romantic sound into the Bond dynamism, and I think it does work better in The Living Daylights. But at the same time, I still just have a few issues with Simon Le Bon's vocals fitting into it. Just as I have a few issues with quite a lot of that film itself fitting into the kind of larger Bond pantheon. But yeah. Next up for me, and it pains me to put a couple of Scots relatively low on the list, but here's a couple back to back. For Your Eyes Only, Sheena Easton at 20. And again, just comes down to, it's just one of the more subdued ballads that just doesn't quite resonate for me as much as some of the more romantic ballads would do in the franchise. I mean, the idea of having her do this, Shane Easton do this. I mean, she would go on to a very successful career, as we know, but at this point, she was still very much known as being a more twee pop star with, my baby takes them on a
Right.
train.
Right.
So it's different to hear her do this kind of thing. She go on to very different things again with, Prince and
Prince.
whatnot,
Right.
Sugar
Right.
Walls. Blimey. Sugar Walls would have been a good Bond theme, certainly thematically, if nothing else. But I just don't think, again, and this is a commonality in my bottom part, is that I don't think it stretches her, and I don't think it takes as many chances as some of the other songs above it in the list, and I don't think it's got as many interesting parts. So that's why it's relatively low. I mentioned there'd be another Scot to follow. That Scot is indeed Shirley Manson, meaning that Garbage, you're up next with The World Is Not Enough. I really like Shirley's vocals, and I think she would be much higher on the list. I just don't particularly love the 1999 production of the actual track itself. But I do love her vocal. It does sound mournful, but epic at the same time. She's not doing the slow balladeer thing. She's able to kind of do coming from that kind of alternative background. She's able to do quite a different sound. So she's able to do a more sweeping version of a kind of dangerous but still sad and subdued style, which is quite unique to the franchise. But I just think the 1999 production value lets it down somewhat, which we'll call it the Christmas Jones effect, if for no other reason than that gets a nice early reference into one of that film. So sorry, Shirley. I think you were just let down by the era. And I don't know. Again, I think we're now in the territory where everything here, I think I recommend as music, if nothing else. Another way to die from Quantum of Solace by Alicia Keys and Jack. I was going to say Alicia White and Jack Keys. They must get married at some point. Not told anything.
Right.
I hated this at the time. Absolutely hated it, and for exactly the reason that you hinted at, because I knew what else was out there that was very nearly the Bond theme. And this to me is very much EON trying to get in, oh, wait a minute, we can get Alicia Keys and Jack White, so we can get massive R&B star and cool windy guitar player. But I just think the synergy between them doesn't work terribly well. But I do like individual constituent parts. I like Jack's jagged guitar stings. I like if not his actual voice on some of the parts, I do like the rhythm of the vocal. I like that he's using his voice quite percussively throughout the track.
Right.
But personally, I would have had Alicia Keys do all the singing and Jack White do all the guitar playing, and I think you'd end up with her song Empire State of Mind. That kind of thing would have been a better Bond theme than the actual Bond theme that she did, which is kind of strange. But it's grown on me over time. I must admit that's one that has grown on me. If we'd have done this exercise not terribly long ago, it would have been much closer to the bottom. Next up for me, 17 from No Time to Die is Billie Eilish's effort. I almost consider the three from 2012 to 2021, I guess it was. Blame it, felt like that film took forever to come out with delays, didn't it? And no time.
Right.
Due to obviously world circumstances. But I think it's the lesser of that kind of trilogy where you can tell at that point they are trying to get someone in to do an Adele, because Adele didn't just have a #1 record with her song, she also won an Oscar. So it was very much, well, we definitely need to chase that success again. Billie Eilish is a terrific performer. I think her and her brother Phineas are very exciting young musicians and kind of disprove, along with people like Lana Del Rey, that there's no good music in the charts. And not everything works for me that she produces, but certainly I think this song was a great example of someone who she was born about the time that Pierce Brosnan was leaving the role. but
Right.
fully inhabits the James Bond world. It doesn't sound out of place at all.
No.
And I like that it picks up in the orchestration on her last notes of each chorus. So, like, when she's going, there's just no time to, and then when she has die, that's when the music starts to become sweeping and whatnot. I think that's a really interesting way to take it. Next up for me, 16, Tomorrow Never Dies, Sheryl Crow. Again, I think it's a great song. I'm very much with you on that. That's let down by Sheryl Crow a little bit. She sounds like, and it's just not her wheelhouse. I don't think it's her fault. She was recruited because in 1997 she was absolutely massive with Every Day Is a Winding Road and all these kind of hits. So she was very much that type of singer that the casual audience would have been able to identify with at the time. So she was recruited quite late on in the process, too late to be incorporated into the score by David Arnold. And the Tomorrow Never Dies song itself, I think, is a great Bond-ish theme, almost in a parody of a James Bond song, where, as you said, it points out a lot of the tropes in the song itself, martinis, girls, and guns. And I do like some of her vocals, but it tends to be the actual verses rather than the choruses. When she's singing a bit more sarcastically, almost with the "it's murder and a love affair," those moments.
Right.
But it's the choruses that let her down, where she's having to do the "until the day."
Well, she just doesn't have the pipes for it.
Yeah, it's like they've written a Shirley Bassey chorus for a single.
Yeah, and that's no reason to knock her against her, but she just isn't physically set up to sing something that big. It's too big for her.
Yeah, and it's annoying because the verses, it sounds like they're really onto something with her, something quite interesting, something quite knowing, which would have worked perfectly in the Pierce Brosnan era, which were very much we know that we can be quite fun and goofy, but also serious at the same time. That's the perfect era to have done that in. But yeah, I just think they just needed to tone down the arrangement, and that song could have worked so much better and not let down the audience. And Cheryl, I think she's a victim of that rather than anything else. Diamonds Are Forever is my number 15. I do love the part that, as you mentioned, where it comes back in and then it picks up the pace. It's double time almost when she's going, "Diamonds are forever, forever,
Right.
forever." I love that part. But the lyrics are almost so incredibly over the top, punny, that I can't quite get over. They are all I need to please me. They can stimulate and tease me. It's like,
If I could interject for a second, but I think that's one of the things that makes it worse. Because remember, this is somebody who had a massive hit with Big Spender.
yes, yeah.
So it's kind of her thing.
Yeah, it's just, and again, I just think it's because it doesn't tie into the actual feel of where the era itself is, because EON were in such a weird place themselves. I mean, they were coming off. This should have been, we'll go into it when we touch the film, but this should have been the soundtrack to a very epic revenge film, and it ends up being the soundtrack to a film where Charles Gray's in drag. So it is a kind of, what do we do for this? I guess we'll just give Shirley a call and we'll just write a kind of punny lyric and blah blah blah. It just doesn't quite work for me. Shirley's on fire. She's absolutely on fire. But I just think it's almost too goofy for a film that doesn't know whether it is goofy or whether it is the revenge thriller because of what happened in the previous film with a different actor. But again, we don't want to go into too much of that kind of stuff just now. Next up, 14, You Only Live Twice, Nancy Sinatra. For me, it's all about the arrangement, because I think she's got something of a flat voice in places. None more so than when she sings that awful duet with her father, Something Stupid, which, has there been a better titled song? I mean, first of all, you don't sing a song about having a romance with your father.
Right.
And secondly, her vocals on that, which I know I stand in line until you think you I think she's very flat in places here as well, but then she picks up on those parts that you mentioned with the stranger and the danger is gone. She kind of picks up on those parts, and I think that does her a bit more credit. But it's all about the arrangement for me.
Gorgeous.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
that to me is where Bond almost, and it isn't out the 60s, it's still 67, but it sounds so much more contemporary than it did just a year or two earlier. So much more.
Absolutely. Great comment.
It's a terrific arrangement, just a gorgeous piece of music. 13 for me, Ratings on the Wall by Sam Smith. I think it was a wonderful choice to have Sam Smith do this. Again, like I mentioned, it's very much a Adele work, so let's get somebody who's a bit Adele-like. So Sam Smith comes in, same sort of music as Adele, certainly very much the same kind of audience, mass appeal and whatnot. But it was a bold choice to have someone like Sam Smith as an openly gay young man to sing a Bond theme, a franchise that's been accused of, and fairly so in a lot of cases throughout the years of misogyny and whatnot. To have an openly gay man singing the theme tune was quite a bold move. Quite a great song, though. Most importantly, Sam Smith leaves nothing. I mean, the Ratings on the Wall, I remember hearing for the first time when it debuted on Radio 1, and it's still a big deal whenever the new Bond theme is going to debut on Radio 1. And people were very divided on it. I remember that. People weren't sure about the falsetto parts, and I thought, well, that's Sam Smith, that's what makes him. I love
that's the haunting part.
Yeah, when he's doing the falsetto, but then it's when he comes down from it, he goes, "And give it all up," and then "for you," like when he comes back down out of the falsetto, and then goes back into it again. I think that's just absolutely gorgeous. I think it's a song where the constituent parts make it more than the whole song itself. I don't think overall, so that's why it's kind of in the middle, but the constituent parts are gorgeous. I think there's a great story to it, and I think Sam knocks it out of the park. I think he's on.
Yeah, he does.
He's phenomenal. Much higher than a lot of people would have it here. I'm going to have The Man with the Golden Gun by Lulu. So maybe this is a little bit of Scottish bias coming in, but Lulu is up here at 12. And I will admit to massive amounts of hypocrisy because I criticised Diamonds Are Forever for being far too punny for my taste. The Man with the Golden Gun is just full of puns, isn't it? I mean, that it's almost he has a powerful weapon. He charges 1,000,000 shots. An assassin second to none. The man with the golden gun. But it's just fun to me. And like that film itself, which I have more time for than a lot of people, it's just a fun ride. There's no pretensions about this song whatsoever. I love that it's about Scaramanga, so it's gone back to the earlier Bond films where it's specifically about the villain himself rather than being about Bond, which wouldn't happen until relatively late into the franchise. I think Nobody Does It Better was the first Bond song about Bond, really.
It's actually about Bond, right?
Yeah.
Right.
As we can go into when we cover the films, there were disregarded ones that were about Bond, but we never actually got those at the time. But Lulu does a phenomenal voice. I love it when it slows down and becomes a bit more jazzy. I don't like the refrain part where she actually sings James Bond is here. I'm not too crazy about that part, but I'm all about the whole no one can catch him, no headline can match him for his $1 million skill.
Right.
One golden shot means another poor victim has come to a glittering, and I just think it's a fun, almost camp karaoke song in a strange way. I think it just works on that level. Number 11, And this is where, to be honest, the next whole bunch could be thrown around in any old order, and I would not argue against myself. I'm going to go with Tom Jones Thunderball. Wow, I mean, it very much is in the mold of, okay, Goldfinger worked, so let's do another in that style. But certainly bringing in Tom Jones, it's funny when people say, "Well, they're just bringing in Billie Eilish because she's the current new star." Well, so was Tom Jones when this came out. He'd literally just debuted. So Tom had hardly been about for a year in terms of the charts, but the arrangement's phenomenal on it, and Thunderball. Tom's vocals are just nuts. And famously, he fainted at the end of the recording process when he held that, and he strikes like thunder.
And you actually hear the pitch go,
yeah, and then
it just falls off because he's out of breath.
Cut and ambulance.
Right.
Right. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, the legend is that he fainted. He says that. John Barry said that. I don't know if they meant he just physically was exhausted or whatnot. I can't imagine he really fainted and was taken away or anything. But certainly makes a fun anecdote, and it's a terrific song. Again, some very Bondy feels to it. I mean, you could listen to him singing that in Turkish, and you would notice a Bond thing. Just the way he's singing the actual lyrics itself, with he knows the meaning of success, and then just like, well, this sounds like James Bond. It just sounds like a Bond song at this point. So
well, and the orchestration, when it goes to that second part, his needs are more, so he gives less.
Yeah,
I'm like, whoa, goosebumps. I'm like, oh.
But he strikes like Thunderball is a nonsense lyric. And I do love that the Bond films have never been afraid to just make up nonsense lyrics to suit it's just like, and the Moonraker knows. Well, the Moonraker's the name of the space station, but
right.
Doesn't know anything what you're talking about. So I've always appreciated that that sitting in the offices coming up with this stuff. They're just like, who cares? This is just the song part. By the time they notice how gibberish this is, they've bought their ticket anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, blame Don Black for that.
Yeah. Number 10 for me, License to Kill, Gladys Knight. I think this is wonderful because it's very much a return after a sustained period of not having them to the more torch type songs that we would have with Shirley Bassey and Tom Jones and like. It's a bit more contemporary, obviously, and Gladys Knight was more contemporary than them, but even then she was still a legacy star. So to bring her back rather than just have the biggest young band of 89 or whoever was a conscious effort, which is strange because the film itself is a very conscious effort not to be a classic Bond film. So it's almost as if they were hedging their bets, saying, well, if the film's not going to be very Bondy, and we better make sure that the soundtrack is, just to let people know that,
right,
still James Bond. But I think it's a wonderful vocal. With Gladys doing got a license to kill, and I love the to kill. I love the backing part, and I'm going straight for you. It adds some soul to it as well. But when she's doing the license to, dun, 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 dun,
that's a great riff. Absolutely.
Yeah, just absolutely phenomenal. And it could so easily, in 1889, that could have been atrociously dated synth sounds or something. But no.
Well, thank you for making me feel horrible for putting it as low as I did.
No, not at all. It's as you said, it's wonderful that our lists are different because we both had the caveat that we like most of these. It's just something has to go somewhere. Number 9 for me, Live and Let Die, Paul McCartney, Wings. They recorded that at the same session as they did for a TV show called The Zoo Gang with John Mills about John Mills, a Frenchman, French freedom fighters from World War II who in their dotage were coming back and solving crimes. Paul McCartney was writing both songs concurrently. So it's quite interesting to think that maybe in a different reality, this was the theme tune to the John Mills TV show, and the John Mills theme was actually the one that he was thinking of for Bond, and he wasn't quite sure which one to go with. But yeah, talk about your nonsense lyrics when he's singing the it comes into the when you were young and your heart was an open book. Used to say live and you know you did, you know you did. But in this ever-changing world in which we're living, I mean, it's just it's bizarrely phrased just to get it to rhyme. Makes you give in and cry. But nobody cares about the lyrics because the music in this one is just so intricate and fascinating.
Right.
Say live and let die. Boom, boom. And as you mentioned, there's two parts in the middle. So we've got the bridge and we've got the middle eight. We've got the da-na-na, da-na-na, da-na, with the whoop, da-na-na, whoop, da-na-na, da-na, da-na-na.
Right.
And then it breaks down into the reggae section after that, which is even more fascinating. The really going all, well, you got a job to do, you got to do it well, you got to give the other bill, and then back in it.
Right.
So it's great. It's a very much like Band on the Run, the title track, and that it's almost a little mini suite itself.
Right.
It's terrific effort from Paul and Wings, and so memorable. And one of the reasons I don't care for the Guns N' Roses cover is that to me, this just sounds absolutely perfect. I don't think they add anything to it. It's one of those covers where you think you've not done anything new here because this was already rocking as hell. Still sounds fresh as a daisy to this day. Number 8 for me, Carly Simon's "Nobody Does It Better" from The Spy Who Loved Me. I like that the title of the film is in the lyric, but it's not the actual title of the song.
Right.
Because like heaven above me, the spy who loved me is keeping all my secrets safe tonight. Very romantic, but not almost in a breezy way. I just like the term yacht rock because I think it's used disparagingly sometimes, but I think in the best possible way you could call this breeze rock, and it sounds like something you could listen to while out in the sea and having just lazing. It's a lazy, laid back version of a Bond theme, a breathlessly romantic thing. It's not an over the top type of track at all. It's very Roger Moore actually. It's really kind of natural and well paced. I think it's a terrific song. I think Carly coming in gives it a very 70s vibe, obviously. Just like Paul McCartney had done, it gives it a much more contemporary feel, and you get the notion that they are, for the first time now that we've moved away from the 60s, they're intentionally trying to capture the zeitgeist. So it's 1977, we need somebody who's very contemporary, very AOR, very FM radio, that kind of thing. And it works perfectly. It's
also very unique in the fact that it starts almost exclusively with piano.
Yeah.
And that was not something that they had done before.
No.
And it does build to a bigger orchestration, but Hamlish wrote it on piano and he used piano in the song. And I think that is a unique thing about that song. It stands out for that.
I've always had a problem with her biggest hit though, with "You're So Vain," because the person in question, Bottom Beatty, let's call him,
right.
That song is about him, so I really don't get her point. You walked into the party like you were walking into a yacht. Your hat strategically dipped below one eye. Your scarf, it was apricot. It is about him, Carly. You don't need to pull him up for that one. So
Right.
the song is literally about him. So I don't think he is being selfish if he thinks that song's about him. You bet you think the song is about you. It is, Carly. Don't be cheeky. Don't be rude. It is about him.
Right.
But I almost like this because it is kind of a James Bond version of that, where she's singing such directly to James Bond himself. She almost becomes the Bond girl in the situation.
Good observation.
Which is who was the Bond girl? Barbara Bach, wasn't it?
Bach.
Yeah. Yeah, Barbara Bach, who, funnily enough, married Ringo Starr to give us another Beatles connection. Number 7, a little bit lower than you had it, but again, at this point, it's almost semantics to care about positioning apart from the very top. Goldfinger. I mean, although I had Shirley lower than you in the other 2 tracks, this is, you look up Bond theme in the dictionary, and apart from the actual Bond theme, the notion of a hired hand doing a Bond theme, this is what you're going to find with this song, and written by Anthony Newley of all people, which is so bizarre. The guy who started out as a child actor, influenced David Bowie, influenced Johnny Depp's pirate voice as Captain Jack Sparrow and things. But he was one of the co-writers on this, and one of the writers of the soundtrack for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
Willy Wonka.
Yeah. The 70s, but I never met it is Charlie in the no, it's Willy Wonka in the 70s one, Charlie in the 2000s one. So yeah, Anthony Newley wrote Goldfinger. I'm not really sure if there's much more that can be said about Goldfinger. You covered it perfectly. It's just when you think of a Bond theme, even if it's not your favorite, it probably is just one of the first things that pops into your head. And again, it's got this is our first example of the song being about the villain, to set up the insidious nature of who this Goldfinger character is going to be. And when she's singing some of those parts, such a cold finger beckons you, and she's really acting. You can almost see her in the studio giving it the whole, to enter his web of sin, but don't go in. And even those parts go there.
Yeah,
it's
perfect.
So sympathetic to the Bond theme itself as well. It ties in perfectly. It's gorgeous, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Number 6, I'm going to put it as high as this, is Skyfall by Adele. I think it is just an absolutely sensationally gorgeous song. Again, they were going very much for who's the most famous person we can get, but it just so happens that it's someone who was. Adele turned out to be quite a big Bond fan, which they didn't expect, and she really wanted to go back to the idea of doing a Shirley Bassey-like song, and especially with Skyfall being the 50th anniversary film, that was just perfect timing to go back to that sound. Again, she had a #1 record and an Oscar for her efforts. She easily was the biggest star on earth in this period. She was just selling millions and millions of records at a time where she was credited for almost kickstarting the vinyl revolution single-handedly at one point, for new records at least, because she was selling so many, which was just unprecedented. Just in 2012, it's funny how the game's changed so much that vinyl is now overtaking CD again. In 2012 alone, that was still quite different. What I love about the lyric for Skyfall is that it tells you the whole film. It doesn't just give you snippets. It tells you the plot of the whole film, including the third act.
Right.
We will stand tall and face it all together at Skyfall. So it might just sound like another Bondy lyric when you just hear it as a radio song, but in context of the movie and knowing the plot of the film, wow, it works perfectly. I mean, it really is an amazing soundtrack to. Well, I won't give too much of my opinion on the film itself, but such a perfect soundtrack for that particular installment. And Adele's voice on it is fantastic with the whole. She doesn't overdo it, but when she's doing little parts, even like the "You may have my number, you can take my name, but you never have my heart. Let this guy," and then I love the backing vocal. "Let this guy fall, and I crumble." Love those parts. And then when she does allow herself to do the more traditional Shirley Bassey type thing, where she really belts that last part, oh, wonderful. When she's doing the "Sky fall," right up, right up, right up, right up, and then brings it down to a nice cooling end, which, yeah, just wow, wow. Number 5 for me. I'm going to do the opposite of you. So you went with, from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, "We have all the time."
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'm going to do the instrumental version. For
Very cool.
This was the actual Bond theme of the film, but I don't think it's a terrible hipstery choice. I mean, that could come off as being like, oh, you don't want to have Louis Armstrong in the list, but anyone who has heard that knows that that's a phenomenal instrumental and a phenomenal James Bond piece of music, with the whole dun, 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 dun. Wow, wow. It sets up the notion of, we've got a new Bond, we'd better have an instrumental and come up with a new Bond theme, almost seems to be the idea. You know, like let's literally come up with something akin to the Doctor No theme, and give it to George, which, as we know, he wouldn't need for long. That instrumental just and then when it slows down, and then it becomes almost dangerous sounding with it's heavy parts in it as well, which you just won't expect at this point in the franchise. So I think it's just one of the most wonderful mood setters, for a Bond film, and these are always obviously at the start or just after the cold open. So that's literally the role in the film, is to be a mood setter in places. And for me, there's very few examples that are better on the John Barry Orchestra version of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Much higher.
I'm sorry. I also think it's great from a stylistic standpoint, because it's also not only the end of the decade, it's the last real theme song that is delivered in a swing format.
Mm-hmm.
After that, as soon as we get to 71 with Diamonds Are Forever, it's a rock beat.
Yes.
And because all of a sudden on Her Majesty's Secret Service, like, you're like, it's driving, it's got swing power to it. I think that's awesome.
The John Barry Orchestra, whereas that would never have happened again if they couldn't get a major star to do their opening. They wouldn't have just given it to essentially an orchestra with a jazz trio inside it. That wouldn't have been the choice going forward. They would have just found another rock act, another pop act, right. Another soul act. In the last, again, since Adele, the last 3 films we've had have all been very much modern, kind of mournful pop songs. Billie Eilish's music's more upbeat than Adele or Sam Smith's. But generally speaking, all 3 of the songs have a commonality. And you're right, there are kind of movements to Bond, whereas that 60s period did have much more of a swing. There'd be parts that were bossa nova, there'd be parts that, that sounded more Gets Gilberto than
right.
than anything else, that would come just a couple of years later. And that's something EON have always been great with, is picking up. The times are changing and changing just in time with them. They never sound too out of date with their music, which is remarkable after all these years. Number 4 for me, and I've got it way higher than you do. And this might be age, because it was the first Bond film I ever saw in the cinema. GoldenEye, Tina Turner. Again, does the let's do an old fashioned type of Bond song thing. But it's written by Bono and The Edge from U2, which is such a bizarre. Uh, I can't imagine Bono and The Edge sitting down writing the lyrics of. Let's imagine we're Tina Turner being obsessed with James Bond as a young girl. That's a bizarre notion to have in your head. But I love GoldenEye with the "You'll never know how I watch you from the shadows as a child." When she goes into the actual choruses, sounds glorious. I love the introduction parts with the dun 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 dun, then dead silence. Dun 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 dun.
Right.
That
Yeah.
is very much we've been listening to Goldfinger, and we know. Let's go back to that. Let's go all the way back there. Dum 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 dum. Silent. Dum 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 dum. Dum. And Tina Turner's just such a perfect choice if you're going to try and get a modern version, try and replicate that. Shirley could have done it herself, but I'd imagine they wanted the Renaissance at the time that Tina was having was helpful for them, gives them a legacy act. But also Tina was massive at the time after the What's Love Got to Do with the movie and things. She was having such a great comeback herself. Yeah, just a terrific song. And a great way to reintroduce a classic Bond sound with a very modern Bond with Pierce Brosnan. Although what does M call him? The sexist, misogynist dinosaur, the relic of the Cold War.
Relic of the Cold War.
We'll see how that pans out. But number 3, I'm going to go like you with the vocal version of "From Russia with Love" by Matt Monro. I think Matt Monro's got a gorgeous voice, and I love this song. His voice is silky smooth, but
that's the word.
You can find a million crooners that have a silky smooth voice, but he also finds a way to have this very sympathetic. He almost sounds like he could be the spy in question singing this. Which is strange because he was a milkman. So a bit like Sean Connery was also a milkman. There's a strange connection between Milkman and the Bond franchise.
Right.
But Matt Monro, when he's singing the "From Russia with Love, I fly to you," and it just instantly it sounds warm and embracing. But then you start hearing instrumentation coming in that adds Turkish flares, the intent, because the film's set, although it's called "From Russia with Love," there's parts set in Turkey as we know and whatnot, and it adds in some Middle Eastern influences and it adds in some bouzouki in parts as well, which is quite odd. But it's wonderful that here we are in only the second film and they're already thinking, what's a Bond theme? You know, what is it this time? It's at this stage they could be forgiven for still being a bit. Do we need this? Can we not just do the same? You know, is this a recurring thing we do now? I guess, but they had it sorted straight away. They had this great song. And Matt Monro just absolutely kills it. And again, when he sings that "I fly to you," do, 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 and you're like, oh, he's going to go for it here. The way it's building up, you know, almost tells you he's going to do this. He's going to go for it. From Russia with love. And it's not in a big Thunderball Tom Jones way, but
no,
in a gorgeous crooner way. It was a bit cut price Sinatra to some people, but personally, I think he's got bags of personality singing this song, and I think
I do too.
I think he absolutely nails it, and it's a terrific song. My number 2, probably again will surprise people. I've got it so very high, but "You Know My Name" by Chris Cornell from Casino Royale. I think is just a masterpiece. You're telling an audience after the disaster that we had at the bottom of our list, that we're doing a modern James Bond. We're going to be contemporary. You're telling the audience that the film series itself is going to be soft rebooted or hard rebooted in some ways, because we're going back to the the origins of his double O license. But Chris Cornell, the theme that he has with the You Know My Name, it does have, yes, obviously a great alternative rock sound with one of the great vocalists of the late 80s and straight through the 90s and the 2000s, come to think of it. But it's also Bondy. It doesn't ever say, "Oh, we're not going to be Bondy at all." We're past that. We're going to just pretend that we're super duper modern, and the film itself kind of. I love Casino Royale. We'll go into that. Be so far down the road that I can safely say that without worrying. But I love Casino Royale. But there is very much a feel of, oh, we better be a bit more Bourne Identity, isn't there? There's very much a feel of that. But the theme tune itself very much reminds you that we're still in James Bond territory here. It's a blunt instrument, as James Bond himself is, but it's still very much a Bond theme. When Chris is singing the "Arm yourself because no one else will save you," and then the horns come in, and that's where James Bond's starting to kind of almost be born with the "and they will betray you," and while the horns go. You think, wow, this is just like in the film itself. James Bond isn't rewarded with the James Bond theme straight away. He gets a little
Right, he has to earn it.
Yeah, he gets it gradually, like a video game. He has to pick up the pieces as he goes along the film and be rewarded at the end by becoming James Bond. And the theme tune itself does that. It lets him have a snippet of James Bond. And Chris Cornell's vocals insane on it. I find it quite a hard song to listen to now with some of the lyrics, actually, with the I've seen angels fall from blinding heights and things, given what happened to Chris. But I think it's a terrifically powerful song. And watching it in the cinema in 2006, I just remember thinking, with the black and white opening, with the insanely cool title credits themselves, and with this song, within the first 10 minutes, before we even get to the African parkour sequence, I just remember thinking, I have no worries. This is Bond. This is completely Bond now. I'm 100% sold. So yeah, Chris Cornell's that high for me, number 2, which means there's a number 1. So you and I both had the same bottom and the same top, and we both said that they could never change. And I think it would be difficult to beat Madonna at the bottom, but I don't think you can beat the Bond theme at the top. Just the James Bond theme itself by the John Barry Orchestra, as played by them. There's a reason why at the end of a Bond film it doesn't get redone, it doesn't get remixed. I mean, it has been, but in the films themselves, it always uses the Bond theme. When they rebooted Bond, they didn't reboot the theme. It's still the Bond theme. So when we had the Olympics in 2012, when Daniel Craig and the Queen parachuted out the helicopter above the stadium, it was the Bond theme playing, and it sounded as contemporary as any music that's been played on that day. Just absolute sensational stuff. As you said, it almost tells a story through the music. It sounds dangerous. It sounds secret agent like. It would inspire a million knockoffs. We know there'd be so many Italian films that would just do a variation on this. There'd be so many knockoffs of this kind of track that would just try and sound spy-like by taking this theme and deconstructing and stealing it, but nobody's managed to come close to it. And
yep,
just essence and that almost kind of Dwayne Eddy twang at the end, It's iconic from start to finish. Gets the adrenaline pumping even now, 60 years on. To hear that in any Bond film that you watch, is always used for sequences where Bond has the upper hand or gains the upper hand, usually, where you think he's, oh, how's he going to get out of this one? Oh, he's done it. Here comes the Bond theme. So, you know, oh, Roger's falling off the cliff here. How's he going to get out of this? What's this? He's got a Union Jack parachute.
Right.
You know, it's almost cartoonish sometimes when it's used, but it's just such a great piece of music that it can never be changed, it can never be removed, it can never be altered. It will just be the James Bond theme. They have thrown in remixes, like Moby did one on one of these soundtracks. You know, included samples of some of the films and things with no, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. And
I expect you to die.
You know, it added that on top of the theme and just added some beats and rhythms and things, and you just think it never needs that. It never needs that. And I'm not against that in principle as a fun exercise, but the Bond theme abides for a reason. It is, for all intents and purposes, by our standards, it is now classical music.
Right.
You know, I mean, the back says 26 classic James Bond film themes. And to me, yeah, this to me is just the perfect illustration of a film score that will abide. And we had a bit of a joke saying, should we count 3 blind mice? Because as we know, the opening for Doctor No is a bit odd when it starts with a few little 30-second tracks and
right.
Then it turns into the Bond theme. But yeah, the Bond theme is, I mean, it's now just called James Bond theme, but essentially the soundtrack to Doctor No. In an alternate world, they could have just used Underneath the Mango Tree or something, and we would never have had this whole lineage of great Bond music. You know, it could have been and who knows, the franchise may not have worked, because that's parcel of the package for me is the music itself of Bond. As you say, there's a reason why they're making documentaries to this day, and they're doing concerts at the Albert Hall and giving Oscars to Sam Smith and Adele for their work on Bond themes. And it's still a big deal. We're still getting the biggest star in the world in Billie Eilish, as she was a couple of years ago, to do the Bond theme. So it's not passé. It's not something that's gone away and disappeared and become irrelevant. It's still such a massive deal. It's, you know, we don't know what's coming next with the franchise. So we don't know what's going to come next musically, but by goodness, what a lineage they have to follow up. Bar, and I literally mean pretty much just Madonna and Rita Coolidge. Pretty much everything else on here, I would keep, no problems.
Well, and I think it's important too that no matter what changes, whether it's Bond, whether it's, you know, the producers, and whether it's the composer, there is almost an unspoken edict or expectation that, yes, be a little creative, be new, whatever, but don't stray too far. There's certain things that we're going to expect from you that are essential Bondisms.
Yeah.
And audiences react negatively when they're not there, or they sense them in a altered or morphed way that doesn't sit home. Yeah. They're like, wait a second. That's not right. I mean, you wouldn't change dun, 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 dun. I mean, you wouldn't change that. That'd be stupid, you know.
And yet the funny part of that is that's the Imperial March, which wasn't even in Star Wars. It was only in Empire. But it's funny how that kind of became so synonymous with the whole franchise. You know?
Right. Right.
Whereas Bond starts with the Bond theme, and you're right, it does have rules, but it allows you to, as long as you know the rules, it allows you to also break the rules. It's never too restraining, and that's probably how they continue to get some of the biggest stars on earth. Is first of all, it pretty much guarantees you a hit single, and these days an Oscar, or at least a nomination. But certainly it gives you a piece of iconography, which I don't think it's a coincidence that quite a lot of these artists have, especially in the past, going back to the Brosnan era at least, all either been raised on Bond or kind of come up in that period with Bond. Whereas obviously Matt Monroe was,
Well, and it's that way for
years
actors
ago.
as well, David,
Yeah.
because I mean, take Dame Judy. Her career was more than solidified. She was perfectly legitimate and hailed as one of the great actresses of her generation. All of a sudden, she's in the Bond series. Ray Fiennes.
Yeah.
You're like, once you've dipped your toes or even gotten a bit doused in the Bond water, there's something different about your career. There's kind of a
yeah.
I was in Bond.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why it was. And we won't be covering this one for a while, but that's why I was immensely frustrated when it came out that Danny Boyle had left what came out to be No Time to Die, or at that time was just Bond 25, because I love Danny Boyle and some of the ideas that he apparently had. We won't know what that film would actually have been, but yeah, I would love to have seen Danny Boyle's take on Bond. As we know, there have been actors who've been very nearly Bonds. We can see their screen tests even, but then various reasons.
Right.
We'll go into all that as we cover throughout the series. So we won't go into too much of that just now, but it's such for a franchise that for some people is quite limited. There's a massive world of James Bond for me. Because again, it does have tropes, but it also knows exactly when to let those tropes be absolutely smashed and throw them away, disregard them entirely. So Bond will go rogue. Bond will not sleep with women this time. Bond will get married. Felix will have compliments of Sharky.
Right.
We'll have all sorts of variations on what people think of as a Bond adventure, right up to No Time to Die. But I'm very much looking forward to beginning our journey. So we're going to be, and I'm glad that we both picked that as number one, because it means we'll be returning to it very soon. And we'll be doing next month. We'll be covering the first two in the franchise, which will mean that we get to talk about Dr. No, which gives us the James Bond theme, and Three Blind Mice, and Underneath the Mango Tree. And then, of course, From Russia with Love, the second in the franchise. And I should, if I wasn't so lazy, Peter, I'd have a title card at the end saying Peter Jones shall return in.
Right.
Yeah.
I just need my gun.
Yeah. You should have come on with it. It should have been a battle sequence. If only Zoom.
Limited resources.
Yeah, I was going to say, if only Zoom had that filter, you could hit a button and have the. But I suppose during lockdown, every man baby would have just been trying to be James Bond if they introduced the walking gun barrels.
That's right. And then all of a sudden, nobody who's ever paid attention to us says, "You're infringing some kind of something. Take that thing off the internet, you clowns."
Yeah. That's fine. I'm used to complaints by now. But Peter, this was an absolute pleasure. I've had a blast just going through. We've talked for a bit longer than we planned to, but that's because when I get talking about Bond, we tend to gush. And you're the same. We've already been doing it over Facebook Messenger and whatnot, planning ideas. So I'm very much looking forward to covering.
Thank you. This was a great fun and a great groundwork and framework to move forward.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
Funny to think we've covered all the films already in one aspect, so we now just need to flesh everything out massively.
Right.
Yeah, so next time out, folks, it will be Dr. No, it will be From Russia with Love. But Peter, if you get anything upcoming anywhere else that you'd like to mention that people can check out, and I can stick it in the description for you.
Well, I'm just kind of a wandering minstrel. I'll travel between Contrarians, Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation, Ryan's Final Destination, and very honored to be here for my inaugural with you, David. It's been an honor.
No, the honor was entirely mine. So I will I will cherry pick a few of your greatest hits, and stick them in the comments, and have people be able to find you. It's always a pleasure, of course, to be able to link to friends like Ryan and Peter and Marco and whatnot in the Contrarian. So I'll stick in a few of your finest moments, although I don't
Thank
think
you, sir.
I don't think anybody will find a finer moment than that wonderful suit you've turned up in this evening. It's
Thank you.
a touch of class to proceedings. It's wonderful. You add production value just by being here. So,
Oh, thank you, sir.
but as I sit here in a hipster beanie at 1:30 in the morning talking nonsense.
No, I understand.
So, Peter, a pleasure, my friend. We shall
Thank you, sir.
We shall return in a month or so to do our inaugural episode on the films themselves, and we may have some surprise episodes along the way where we discuss miscellany and whatnot, but we'll cross those bridges when we blow them up.
Very good.
Folks, thanks very much for watching. Stay very safe out there, and love and mercy.
Night.
Take it easy.